solve this problem, but we're absolutely a participant in it. We are absolutely part of the solution. So if the state has to, the state or the cities, the counties have to come up with about 15 to 20%, that's anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 units. At roughly 200,000 per unit, we're talking a pretty significant financial obligation. So what we ultimately tried to do with the bill is we tried to bring to bear free market principles with also good policy, which is we didn't want to come in and tell you, hey, you guys will do this and it shall look like this, because it doesn't. You know, each of your cities, each of your localities are all very different. So, but what we wanted to do was to establish what the guiding principles were that you should consider. We tried to tie together the House Bill 259, which was, hey, guys, have a plan and think this through with the growth that's coming. We tied that together with Senate Bill 136, which was the governance restructure of transit, and also a funding component with that. And we try to pull those together with Senate Bill 34. Basically what it does is it says, look, as one side of the coin over here is what we do as governments. And in that, try to just have a plan. And that plan is, if you guys are looking at X number of things based upon your unique geographic, demographic aspects, that would make you eligible for the other side of the coin, which is the funding component of transportation. So in addition to that, on the other side of the coin, we were trying to put together a scenario where we could provide a state-funded component of putting in a big chunk of money. We tried to get $24 million. And we ended up getting not quite $24 million. Nothing, actually. We got nothing. So about 2 weeks ago, I sat down with House and Senate leadership and I said, guys, don't send me on a suicide run. I'm not going to do it. Like, if you guys are not behind me here and you're not going to come up with the money, then let's just disband the commission. Why waste everybody's time? I mean it. Don't waste our time. And both House and Senate leadership said, no, no, no. We're there. We understand. We got to do something. Okay, then. If we got to do something, then I'm going to be back in here before the next session. I'm going to sit down and say, how much are you guys going to put up? And we'll do our due diligence, and we will be, be it through funding through the Olean Walker Fund, or LIHTC credits, or certification of those credits, or vouchers, or you name it. We're going to come up with 5, 6, 7 options, and we may say, hey, we want $1 million here, $4 million there, $2 million here, whatever it is that we're going to try to get. We're going to come back in here. We're going to say, okay, guys, put up or shut up. But don't send me on a suicide run as a conservative Republican in an election year on affordable housing if you guys aren't going to step up. And they both said, the Speaker and the President both said, yes, we'll do that. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we did. There's about 25 items listed that are items that you could consider. The actual requirement was, if you live along a transit corridor, either a fixed guide rail or like a BRT or something like that, that you have to just look at 4 of those. Look at 4 of those 25 things. And we knew this was going to be a diverse, set of recommendations. So pick the ones that best suit you. But as our previous presenter showed, those are all the things that she was talking about: inclusionary housing, ADUs, density credits. You go through this whole list. There's going to be something that you guys are saying, hey, wait a second, that would work for us. I promise you, we were pretty comprehensive on that list. And if you don't live on a fixed guide rail, then you don't have to do 4, you have to do 3. I mean, we realized there were, not all areas are equal. So, one difference, because that's a big difference, right? It's 25%. Anyhow, any other thoughts? That's kind of where we got to. The bill passed. We just need to get funding this year. So, Rachel.
Thanks, Senator. And again, huge credit to Senator Anderegg for all of his leadership on this issue, and really for incorporating the thoughts and feelings and policies of all the different stakeholders that were at the table during the Commission on Housing Affordability. So thank you for that. From the league perspective, we represent all 248 cities and towns across Utah, and those cities and towns are very different. But one thing is common is that the city's role really is to ensure that we're providing critical services and ensuring quality of life for current residents and also future residents. So from our perspective, what we were trying to do in Senate Bill 34 was to be proactive, take the tools that cities are already incorporating and spread those best practices statewide. So we realize that we have a role to play in increasing affordability and increasing housing stock, and that role really is focused on planning and regulation. So as opposed to kind of waiting for what the legislature was going to tell us to do on a planning or land use front, we instead self-generated from our membership what are the tools that cities are using. Let's put those out there. Let's make it clear, what you can pick and choose, and really from the ground up allow cities to figure out how to work in additional housing for all income levels from the ground up in a way that works for them. So that was our goal, and I think we accomplished that in SB 34. I think it really does try to promote good planning, and again, kind of hammer home that transportation, land use, access to opportunity nexus that we all know is good planning. Good planning and preparing for the future is really part of the culture of Utah. So I think it resonates with cities and towns to prepare and to plan for the future and take control over those tools that we actually hold in cities. So we're just looking forward to the next 4 years on the commission to again increase what other stakeholders are doing and to look what is the private sector doing, what is the role of economic development, what is the role of federal and state incentives, and just build on what we started really putting into place in the 2018 session with moderate income housing amendment changes and the transportation governance bill. So this is a multi-year effort, and as Senator Anderegg likes to say, this isn't the silver bullet, but this is a good start, and we'll continue to be at the table to work on our Utah-based solution.
I'll use this one here. Good morning, everyone. Echo, okay. So my name is June Hiatt, and I'm with the Utah Housing Coalition, and we play a little bit of a different role. We are also a membership-based organization, but we're on the advocacy end of the housing conversation. So oftentimes we're fielding phone calls from people who are being evicted, people who are trying to find housing, people who are facing some really dire economic concerns because they can't find affordable housing. And so through the work of Tara and other partners, legislation was passed 2 sessions ago to create this commission. And we are really thankful for Senator Anderegg's tenacity and just vision for what this looks like and how much we can achieve together. This is a bipartisan effort with people from all across the housing sectors, from developers to housing authorities, having a robust conversation that we haven't necessarily had at this level before in our state. What Senate Bill 34 allows us to do is plan, and that's a huge component of the housing conversation. We all know, as people who work in cities, how much housing builds our cities and lays a foundation for success, whether we're talking about education or healthcare, bringing in jobs and economic success. And so the exciting thing about Senate Bill 34 for us as housing advocates is to really challenge all of you and see what we can do to broaden the housing conversation, right? We can talk about deficits in housing stock and how many units we need, but we also should be talking about how it's impacting education, how it's impacting homelessness in our communities, how it's impacting healthcare. Last year for the NARO conference, Tara and I were in Cedar City, and we met a woman who was working at the hotel where we were staying, cleaning rooms. She's got a full-time job, and she's living at the homeless shelter because there wasn't any housing that she could afford with her income in Cedar City. Right, so this issue is not just a Wasatch Front issue, even though maybe that feels like we talk a lot about the Wasatch Front. But we see it impacting rural communities in a different way. Escalante a few years ago tried to hire 2 teachers, a grade 1 teacher and a grade 6 teacher. They went through their process, they found the people they wanted to hire, and when they made offers, realized they only had 1 open home in their community. So now this community's faced with, do we hire a grade 6 teacher or do we hire a grade 1 teacher? Or do we ask grown adults who are professionals to live in the same home until we can sort out our housing issue? So housing is so much more than just filling the units. It's having this holistic conversation about how a lack of affordable housing is impacting these other sectors in our community. So as you are all going through this planning stage and really getting a look at how at what housing units you need, also talk to your school boards, talk to your healthcare administrators, talk to your homeless service providers and your housing authorities, and get an understanding of where the other gaps in your community are. We know that a lack of affordable housing in our communities increases student mobility, which puts pressure on schools in really unique ways that make it difficult to teach students at a higher level. So as you're looking at these plans and really thinking about the future of your communities, right, we're all really lucky to work at these levels and have these tools at our fingertips to plan for the people that, you know, vote us into office or trust us. Really make sure you're taking an entire look at your community and understanding just not the numbers, but what the ripple effects are of not having enough affordable housing, and work with the commission and your local agencies and regionally to understand what you can do to kind of alleviate some of those pressures as well. So that's the Housing Coalition and where our advocacy comes in, and we're excited to be able to work with these folks and everyone on the commission to broaden this conversation out of just numbers and housing needs.
I think that's, June, I think is a really good point. It's important to understand, you know, all of the projections are showing that Utah is going to double its population by 2045. I've got Robert Groh right here in the front row, and he's nodding and smiling a little bit because they were part of that study. So if that's the case, the reality is it's not just those people that are at 30% of AMI or 50% of AMI. I mean, let's pat ourselves on the back and say, good job, Utah, the #1 state to do business. Hooray, hurrah. Let's go ahead and spend tens of millions of dollars on economic development. And we've done that for decades. And good job, Gary. I'm sorry, Governor. That's a good deal. And I'm not going to say it's not. We've brought in a lot of business. We really have. I represent Silicon Slopes. We are a very, very blessed area. I'm not going to say that we're not. However, we're bringing people here from Silicon Valley, and they didn't take a pay cut to come here. So a lot of the people that we're talking about are people that are coming here that are 380% of county average for that job in Utah County. And 70% of this growth is going to be our kids, because we like to have babies here in Utah, okay? 70% of that growth is homegrown. So over Christmas, I'm sitting there, we're having a little Christmas party, I'm sitting there with my 3 nephews, and they're all about to graduate, they're all married, they're all about to graduate from college. And I say, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you gonna go into? One of them's gonna go into being a nurse, the other one's a real estate agent, blah, blah, blah. So where are you guys gonna settle down? They're like, oh, well, we're looking at other states. I was like, well, why? We can't afford a $300,000 condo. We can't afford rent at $1,600 a month for a 2-bedroom. When coming out of college, I will be lucky to be able to afford a $900 payment. That's just the reality of it. So we, as a state, and as all of our cities, have created this monster. Let's not pretend that we haven't. We've done a lot for economic development. Hooray! But we've created this artificial bubble. And so, as a conservative Republican, a lot of my uber conservative constituents are like, you've lost your soul. You're going after something that's traditionally progressive idea. Yeah, but look around my district. Just stop. Look around my district. What's happening? These guys are coming in from California. They just sold their 1/6 of an acre in the Bay Area for $1.8 million. They're looking at a 1/2 acre of land in Lehigh, unentitled, no water, no utilities, $500,000. That's a good deal. Okay, so what does that do to all the housing prices? I bought my house for about $380,000. It's a nice home. It's on a 1/2 acre. I've got a 1/2 acre. I got mine, so I'm excited. My neighbor, kid you not, my neighbor just sold his house 4 weeks ago for $750,000. And I'm going, how in the heck are these guys affording this? I couldn't afford to buy in my neighborhood anymore. That's just the reality of it. So for those of us who got ours, we like to look at this issue and say, well, I don't really know, blah, 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 blah. Take a look at the kids that are just graduating from high school, they're just graduating from college. Yes, in addition to that, the greatest need really is the 30% AMI, the 50% AMI. We're not even going to try to say that it isn't. But this is a statewide issue. And if, as a conservative Republican from Utah County, if I can't be honest about that, then I shouldn't be in this position. That's just the reality. So We're open for any questions you might have specific to the bill. If there's something you're doing in your area that we need to know about, let us know, because guess what? We can come in, we can tweak and modify this bill however we need. If there's something we haven't seen or that we've missed, we want to know about it. Because we are all about what is government's role in helping to solve this issue. I still 100% free market will say, free market's got to come up with 80-85% of this. But what about that 15 to 20%? One in five. What are we going to do? Truth is, every single one of us who has a vote in land use authority has a role to play here. There's no way that I'm going to say you guys have to solve the issue. You're not going to solve this issue, but you can do your part. If every single city were to just have 1% additional, just 1% of all your housing stock, if every city along the Wasatch Front were to do 1%, we're talking about 20,000 units. That's significant. So the bill is, have a plan, figure out how you're going to deal with your growth. If you do these minimum things, and you don't have to just do those minimum things, if you just do these minimum things, then you're available for the TTIF and the TTIF, sorry, the TTIF and the TIF money. Sorry, I wanted to add too many T's there. Which is not insignificant. That's like $750 million a year. Okay, so as you're thinking of how your city's growing and the demands that are going to be placed upon your cities and your development, your planning, these are significant resources. And with that, I've basically beat this thing dead, but if anyone has any questions.
Before we take questions, I just want to plug just really quickly. At the League, one of our major focuses over the interim will be helping cities implement SB 34. For a lot of our, sophisticated cities that have a lot of professional staff along the Wasatch Front, that's easy maybe, but for some of our smaller cities that are a little bit further afield, it's not as straightforward and staff time is more difficult to find. So only 82 cities across Utah actually have to comply with the new modern income housing plan requirements, because we're really focusing on the higher growth cities and the cities that are on the edge of high growth. So that's how we have we've identified cities of certain populations in certain areas. So just a quick plug for this Saturday, we're holding an in-depth 3-hour workshop for those 82 cities specifically, and we're doing it in conjunction with WFRC, MAG, and the other, I think, and any other MPOs? Maybe not. DWS also, to talk about those tools, exactly what you need to do to comply, what data is already out there for you to be able to draw on as you're looking at the current modern income housing stock in your community, and then planning for population and job growth.
I just want to ask Andrew Gruber, did we get the TLC funding through IGG? I think we did. It was $2 million?
1 million.
1 million?
One time, so we need to keep pushing on that.
Okay, so it's just one, but so here, anyone not aware of what TLC money is? Okay, especially if you're rural, you can look to Wasatch Front Regional Council. They can actually provide the funding resources available to bring in the technical expertise in conjunction with the League of Cities and Towns. If you don't know how to pull off what we're basically mandating, there are resources available, and you're right, we've got to make sure that we pony up on that as well. This last session was just funky that way. I mean, we just kind of got into a funk. We took $300 million off the table because we couldn't agree on how to spend it. So.
We should have given that to housing.
We should have given that to housing. The reality is we do have a structural imbalance. We're going to try to figure that out. But there is TLC money available in addition to the resources from the League.
So let's do some questions. Let me just ask you, John's got a microphone, and the reason for the microphone in part is because we are taping this session for those who couldn't be here, who, from a small town in southern Utah, it didn't make any sense to get up here. But this tape, including you asking the question and the good answer, will be available to everyone in the state within a few weeks. So yes, please.
Thank you very much. A brief comment and then a question about the connection between transportation and housing. The comment is, SB 34 is a game-changing bill, and we've had a fair amount of hand-wringing because we didn't get any money in it, and that's unfortunate. And we really all appreciate Senator Anderegg and Rachel and June, the continued push to get resources, but let's not undervalue the really significant policy changes that are included in SB 34. So I just want to say nice work to you all and the people that worked on this. I guess the question is, can you just talk a little bit more about what has been referenced here, how coordinating at the local level where housing goes with transportation is a part of the philosophy of this bill and this approach here, and that housing and transportation costs have to be factored in, the cost burden from all of those issues for families, particularly at lower end of the spectrum, and how we can try to absorb the growth that's coming by making those connections while helping with air quality and other issues. Just talk a little bit about that, please.
I'm a politician, so I always have an opinion, but the reality is that there's this symbiotic relationship, right? As growth occurs, you've got a transportation need, capital development. As capital development occurs, there's greater impacts on growth, which leads to more infrastructure development needs and whatnot. It's kind of the snowball effect. In fact, people say all the time, well, you should just let the free market. I said, well, we are letting the free market. How many $10 million homes do you see right next to I-15? You don't see it. Why? Because it's a free market. Okay? But that doesn't change the fact that people have to get to work and school, and goods have to get to their destination. So as we were looking at how we were going to try to address the affordable housing aspect, we realized that this symbiotic relationship with capital development was a factor we had to look at. And the reality was, density is coming. I'm not trying to say, hey, you guys have to plan for it. I'm just trying to say, have a plan. But at the end of the day, your city councils, everybody that you work with, is ultimately going to make the decisions based upon their unique geographics, their geography, their growth factors of what makes sense in their area. But if it doesn't coordinate with those transportation dollars, you're misallocating your funds. I can't tell you how frustrating it is, and I've got a couple cities in the back, so I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, that I've got cities in my own district who aren't coordinating their transportation dollars. I've got cities that want these to be their major arteries that are not state roads, and I've got other cities that say, no, we want these, and they're not coordinating. And it just drives me nuts, because now you've got this portion of this city that has got high density components happening, tying into areas that are bottlenecks for transportation. And it's just like, come on, guys. I'm not for central planning. I don't think it's good policy. Well, you may disagree, whatever. But the reality is, if we give you tens of millions of dollars for that capital development process right now, just to have you tear it out 15 years from now, we've wasted those resources effectively. Let's be smarter about how we're doing this. And the trickle-down effect, this is not trickle-down economics, this is trickle-down housing, right? The trickle-down effect is that capital development directly affects your density, it directly affects what you zone, how you zone, and what you're trying to get out of your plan. To say anything else is simply not true. So we tried to tie them together.
Well, and if I can ring the low-income housing bell before Rachel jumps in on more of the policy side, if you think about the average American family, 30, and more realistically in the market that we're in now, 50% of the income is spent on housing. 20% is spent on transportation. So you've got 70% of a family's income eaten up by two very, very important things, housing and transportation. That doesn't leave a lot of room in a household budget to participate in the economy in ways that we need to for this free market to work, right? So if we're not linking transportation and housing together, and you've got Harriman, who has a lot of affordable housing, and no transportation, no public transportation, you have a real disconnect in giving a holistic, helpful planning mindset to putting housing in Harriman, because you can't get from where you live in Harriman to resources that you need that may not be in Harriman, right? So thinking about it from the low income side and the family budget side, those two things are linked. And if you have one without the other, it just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense for the family budget.
see how frustrated Senator Anderegg gets with cities, and he still works with us. So thank you for that again.
Because this is where it actually happens.
So just on the transportation and land use type connection, as Heidi said, we can't build our way out of the low income or even affordability problem in Utah. And I would also submit that we can't build enough roads really to just solve our congestion problems in Utah. And I'm sure as everybody in this room knows, we struggle with air quality. Our residents are more and more concerned about the impacts of air quality, the impacts of the time away from their families that they spend trying to get from point A to point B. And so this really is the overarching policy here really is to help communities and encourage communities to look at where housing is going in relation to access to transit, access to jobs, and access to other opportunities. So that's part of the reason that we made these other adjustments to looking at the transportation and land use elements of the general plan. That's another part of SB 34. So while the moderate income housing element updates is kind of the immediate, by December 1st, we need to look at those moderate income housing elements. Those two other elements of the general plan are also modified under SB 34. So the way that we're trying to look at this is it's really a multi-year effort. As you're looking at the different parts of your general plan, think about how the regional transportation plan needs to get incorporated into the land use and transportation plans. Think about where new roads are going to be. Think about where active transportation sites are going to be, and just look at this more holistically. Look at transportation regionally and other access to opportunity regionally too.
Senator Anderegg, Representative Potter is one of our representatives up in the Cache Valley. He co-chairs the Commission on Housing Affordability. We had him as a guest in one of our town hall meetings middle of last year. And shortly after he'd been appointed, he was in our town hall meeting. One of the things he emphasized, he says, this commission's about housing affordability. It's not about affordable housing.
Correct.
He said it's about looking across the entire spectrum of the housing issue. And I would say that the middle market is really where the biggest segment is. I know that's not something state funds can address. In fact, you said it in one of the commission meetings, the state budget is 17 billion, I think is the number.
It's just shy of 19 billion,
Okay,
yes.
now
But
19
9
billion.
million of that, 9 billion of that is federal funds, so we only have about 10 billion of state
So
funds.
we could spend the whole 17 billion dollars and still not solve the problem here in Utah. In our community, we established an ordinance with mixed-use housing to address the middle market. Much of that, or part of that, is multifamily housing. And what the middle market can afford today in our community is a townhome or a condominium. But we priced about 80% of the households out of our city. And recently, our council stepped up and passed a rezone, approved a rezone. And by the end of that following week, we had a group of citizens that filed for a referendum. I mean, I know the House bill passed, but they got in before that. So now we've got a group of citizens that run around town and said, we're going to eliminate all multifamily, high-density housing in our city, sign this referendum. So when I go back and I read the minutes of the Commission on Housing Affordability meetings, all the discussions are about the moderate and low income. And I think this middle market really needs to be addressed. There needs to be a discussion about that. And I'd be happy to be part of that. I mean, it affects our community. In Cache Valley, where we live, there's a huge demand for engineers and people in that middle market, police officers, sheriff's deputies, nurses, school teachers. They can't even find housing. That's an area the commission I don't think is addressed. When I look at the original charter that was passed by the legislature, affordable housing is one of those elements, but I think there's 3 or 4 others that address looking at the entire market.
I think that's a fair assessment. I do know that as we got into this, there was quite a bit of discussion, especially based upon what we built on, we built on House Bill 259, which really looked at the scope of range you're talking about, which was 30% AMI, 50% AMI, 80% AMI. And those, area of median income, you guys can determine what that is area by area within that scope. You're right. I mean, the truth is, we've only just begun this 5-year commission and really looking at, and we started with what I term to be probably the neediest segment, which if government is going to play a role and we're going to actually spend taxpayer dollars, we're going to start by going after really 30% AMI, 50% AMI, kind of that lower echelon. And even then, there's a lower echelon than that, which is permanent assisted housing. You know, there's those people who have mental illnesses that are high functioning enough. They're not needing to be permanently in a state facility, but you get what I'm saying is that we could go down on that spectrum, we could go up on that spectrum, and in any aspect of it, there are going to be areas that we could determine that state can and possibly should play a role. So what you see in Senate Bill 34 is an initial effort, and specifically, I agree with you that I think that we primarily looked at that lower area of the spectrum. I would agree with you also that the biggest portion that we were going to say, if we're going to say 80% AMI or 50% AMI, that we're 55,000 units short statewide. The biggest chunk of that is in that upper middle area, not upper, but that middle area. So,
and if I can add to this, I think when we talk about workforce housing, it's important to talk about wages. So we see a lot of teachers who are entering the workforce who are making 80% of area median income. They're not making a high wage, right? These are the people that build our communities: firefighters, police officers, teachers, nurses, EMTs. They're not making the wages that we want them to be making, and so they can't afford the housing that's available in our communities. This is a complex problem, and as Senator Anderegg has said, there's a lot of areas that need alleviation in the market. But I'll tell you, the 30 to 50% of AMI, developers can't build. It's just not feasible to build that type of housing. And so when we look at where to direct government resources, that's the hardest hit area, because it's the area that has been neglected for the longest period of time, because again, it doesn't make sense for a developer to build that type of housing when they can build workforce housing. Ivory Homes, over the legislative session, rolled out a really robust plan to build workforce housing for teachers and firefighters and EMTs and people throughout the state who are going to be entering the workforce in these city building, community building roles, who can't find housing, right? It shouldn't be acceptable that someone who wants to be a teacher in Lehigh is faced with living in their parents' basement or buying a $300,000 condo, right? That's not justice in terms of housing. So it is a complex problem, but as we're talking about this type of these types of jobs, Mayor Drew, I think it's important to understand what the wage that these people are being paid, and how does that impact their ability to buy housing or to rent housing that's safe and stable and affordable. So when we talk about affordable housing, we do want to see the full range, but as the low-income advocate at the table, the 30% of AMI, the people who are 60, 70 years old living on Social Security, who are making $900 a month, they should only be paying $250 to housing. There's no housing. So what do we do with our retired population of people who are looking for housing and downsizing from the 5 bedrooms? This is really where the commission has to get involved, because the market's not providing any options for that population. I hope that makes sense.
you also brought up a nasty word. It's a swear word. It's referendum. It's a swear word. Let's just call it what it is. It's a swear word. No, I was talking to Senator Howard Stevenson, who passed that referendum piece of legislation, and quite literally, before he retired last year, when we were in our closed caucus, I'm going to tell you what happened in closed caucus. He flat out said, I made a mistake. We've gone too far with this referendum. We need to look at changing the referendum law, because it was actually his legislation the Utah State Supreme Court looked to justify upholding the referendum in Holiday for Cottonwood Mall. So it's there are some changes that need to be made there, but we have to be delicate about it, because the Supreme Court has ruled that referendums actually are constitutional and hold the same legal efficacy as an act of a legislative body. So we are going to have to be careful about how we walk that back. I don't have the answer for you, but as far as I'm concerned, it's a swear word. So don't use them.
Senator and team, thank you so much for your work on this. Can I just talk about the elephant in the room? You mentioned it. I'm up in the Weber County, Uinta area, and we have a great community that's just the Mayberry thing. And when you talk about affordable housing, that young lady spoke to it, it starts to go down the fear journey area. You talked about, we've got ours, I've got mine. And so even in our community, there's the desire to kind of look at the affordable housing thing. But people have got comfortable with the size of piece of land that they have. And they don't want to change things because they've had it in their family for 5,000 generations. It'd be inappropriate goodness. So have you, in the rural areas, start to speak to people's fear? Because you mentioned the word moderate income housing and affordable housing, and people say stupid things of what I'll bring into our community, and all these other types of people will show up. And so have you dealt with that? Because I love what you said, and I appreciate your heart. I really appreciate what work you're doing. So as a small community, I think it's essential when you said we're going to double in the next 20 years, so we better do something in every community. And so I love my community. It's a fantastic community, but people have been settled and they have their piece. They don't want to give their piece up to allow somebody else to move in who may have a smaller piece than their piece, and it may affect their piece. If you know what I mean, Senator? So
Oh, yeah.
have you,
No, what you just said is the single biggest problem. I'll tell you right now. Yeah, we play legislator. We go up, we pass bills. Hey, look what I passed here. Vote for me, right? And it's great. But 95% of what I do is educate. That's what this role is. I have to go back and I have to sit down with my constituents and I have to help them understand what they don't understand. And I'll tell you right now, the media is a flippin' joke. I'll give a 1 hour interview just to be quoted one sentence, and it's spun however they want to spin it. And it's usually the one thing I said flippant at the very end of the conversation that was kind of in jest, right? But no, this is what Senator Anderegg says. So my point is, that's the information they're getting. They're getting information that doesn't always convey the scope or the breadth or depth. And so as elected officials, as city planners, managers, mayors, city councils, you have to educate. And the truth is, we were looking at things. We included not just the items that were going to affect 30% AMI. We included things like down payment assistance, mortgage assistance for first responders. I mean, we kind of said, hey, look at, and the truth is, this is not an exhaustive list, right? This is everything and everything right here is in these 25. Of course not. So to your point, I promise you, good minds and good policy can get together and figure out what works best for your area. And then you've got to have a game plan to educate and bring people along. One of my favorite quotes, it's a religious quote, but I won't say it in a religious context, is nothing has been calculated to change people's hearts and minds better than to gently take them by the hand and lead them along. But you've got to gently take them by the hand and lead them along. You have to educate. You have to bring people to an understanding they didn't have before. And if they're getting all of their information from Fox News or from CNN, and that's all the echo chamber that they're functioning in, of course they're not going to see the world and understand the breadth and depth of the issues we're facing. So you've got to gently take them by the hand and lead them along. So if there's anything you guys are coming up with that we don't have on our list of 25, we want to know about them. Rachel, contact the league, let her know, and we'll do what we can to incorporate it. Maybe we do more of a stratification process to say, okay, this is kind of, these ones fit best in this area, these ones fit best in this area, and whatnot. But it's a continuing process that we got to work on.
And I would just like to just give a quick kind of plug on both Mayor Drew's question and your question, comment. I think it really speaks to the importance of working with developers on getting together, forming that close relationship with developers that are coming to your community to make sure that they are bringing a product that isn't so scary to your residents. And the fear is real, right? People care about their quality of life. Growth, the thing with growth is that they're afraid it's going to change their quality of life. Those are real fears, and I definitely don't want to dismiss those. There are a couple of really responsible developers in the room. I see Ty from Daybreak and Annalise from Ivory, and there are probably others. But work with your developer to make sure that as your residents are expressing fear, that developers are willing to respond to that and bring a product that does meet the income that you're looking for, that missing middle, and also can show residents that putting in a slightly denser development or a different kind of development than you're used to seeing in your area isn't going to affect the way they get to the grocery store or how they're getting their kids to soccer practice. that kind of stuff. So it can work in the fabric of your community, but it does take a strong partnership with your private partners.
And if I can add one last thing before we close. Growth is scary and change is a scary thing, right? We're constantly changing. Communities are living, breathing organisms that have needs that have to be met, and change is coming with every generation. We see it all the time. I think Senator Anderegg really hit the point home as to why he's involved in this. Where are his kids gonna live, right? Is he going to have this quality of life where his kids get to live in his community, he gets to see his grandkids, and he gets to have his family around him, or are his kids gonna move to really cold Montana, right? What does the future of our community look like as we have to assess our own personal needs? And the other thing is, you know, we all age. I've spent a lot of time researching senior housing challenges and homelessness. It's a real thing. So when your communities are coming back, this is an opportunity to have a conversation and say, when your 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom house on the acre lot is no longer working for you because you're retired, where are you going to go? What's available for you to downsize to so that your quality of life maintains and you get to continue living in this community, but maybe you don't have the capacity to mow your lawn every weekend, right? Or where are your kids going to live? Does it make sense for you to live in Weber County and your kids live in Moab? What does that look like? And really ask people, what are they concerned about as their quality of life, or as it pertains to their quality of life changing? And really challenge your communities to think about what development means for them personally. And again, who's gonna live in your community? Where are you gonna go when you need to downsize from the big home? These are all really important questions to kind of alleviating some of these NIMBY, right? NIMBY pushback and fears that we're seeing pop up. And once you get people really talking about it, I think a lot of those fears start to alleviate.
Super. Thanks very much to our panel.